We got our guy Rob Bucksbaum saying good morning, Nick and Deacon Scott. I feel most would think Caldwell would be a vanilla hire, but he was really good with Peyton for many years and then took Detroit to the playoffs. Your sage thoughts. I talked about it last night with Luke. First off, Jim Caldwell, former Iowa Hawkeye defensive back. So that's a big bonus in my book. But of course, he had some success in the league. He did well with Peyton Manning. He was fired after the team went 2-14 when they had the Jim Sorgi, I think Dan Orlovsky too, quarterback years. I don't blame him for that at all. That team ran through Peyton Manning. And once he was out, then the team fell apart. No shock. He also was the offensive coordinator for that magical run with the Ravens in 2012. Happy, I guess, sad, remorseful Remembrance Day. It was that, it would have been 12 years ago now, or 10 years ago, excuse me. The Broncos lost that game to the Ravens. I think it was 10 years ago today. Yeah, that's probably the biggest kick in the nutsack I ever have watching this football team. That one hurt when the Broncos lost to the Ravens and that Jacoby Jones touchdown in overtime. But I guess a few seconds left in the fourth quarter. But he was the offense coordinator for that Ravens team that won the Super Bowl. And then he did not only making the playoffs with the Ravens, winning record 3 of 4 with the Lions, winning record 3 of 4 seasons with the Lions, which is unheard of. Obviously, that team had more talent than what we've seen with Dan Campbell, but that Lions team has been a joke for most of their existence.
No offense, win, Lions fan. I grew up in Atlanta. I'm right there with you.
Yeah,
I feel like I can say that. I get it.
Yeah. It's been bad. But Jim Caldwell, my biggest thing with Jim Caldwell is that he's been out of the league for 5 years. And with Jim Caldwell being out of the league for 5 years, I mean, what does that mean about how the games change? I mean, there's been a transition also in like the age groups of football players as well. I mean, that's something that I've heard coaches talk about. Like we've gone from millennials to Gen Z making up a majority of the locker room. So it's a little bit different in there. Obviously, the pandemic happened, which kind of changed things as well. So I don't know. That's the biggest thing for me was how long he's been away from football. But I think he'd be a good hire. I think he'd be fine. He'd be very solid, especially if he was not the head coach, but brought in a different role.
Again, this steady hand, I think he would be, you mentioned 5 years out of the league. I think he would be great as an assistant. He may or may not want to do that, but to bring him in, let's say you wanted to go with a Shane Steichen, for example, a D'Amico Ryans, you wanted a first timer in here again, have Caldwell come in and be assistant head coach, pay him like a head coach. You've got the money to do it. And D'Amico Ryans would cost you a fraction of what it would take to get Jim Harbaugh or Sean Payton in just plain old green. A fraction, probably less than half, maybe a third, a quarter. Pour some of that savings into the staff around him, including somebody like Jim Caldwell.